provost, dean faculty of clinical sciences, deans of other faculties, the postgraduate school and of students, directors of institutes, heads of departments, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The 20th in the series of the University of Ibadan inaugural lectures for the 2015-2016 session will be delivered by Professor FOLASHADE OmokhodioN of the Department of Community Medicine on behalf of the Faculty of Clinical Sciences. Born in Lagos on 12 January 1957 to Chief Gilbert Benjamin Akinyemi and Mrs. Agnes Sinuade Akinyede of Odo-Ekiti in Ekiti State, Professor FOLASHADE OmokhodioN had a primary school education at St. Mary's Private School, Broad Street in Lagos between 1961 and 1967, and a secondary and higher secondary school education at King's College, Yaba, Lagos between 1968 and 1972 and 1972 to 1974, respectively. Later that year, she gained admission into the MBBS degree program of this university and graduated in 1979. Thereafter, she served as a house officer at the University College Hospital from July 1979 to June 1980 and participated in the National Youth Service Corps scheme as a medical officer from July 1980 to June 1981. She later had a brief stint as a medical officer under Oyo State Health Services, Ibadan, from July to September 1981. After which she had a postgraduate training in occupational medicine at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where she obtained the master's degree in July 1982 and PhD in January 1990, respectively. She obtained the fellowship of the West African College of Physicians in Community Health in 1992 and membership of the Faculty of Occupational Medicine of the Royal College of Physicians of London in 1996. She was awarded the fellowship of the Faculty of Occupational Medicine in 2011 and the fellowship of the Faculty of Public Health of the Royal College of Physicians of the United Kingdom in 2012. Professor OmokhodioN joined the services of this university as a lecturer 1 in the then Department of Preventive and Social Medicine, College of Medicine of this university, with effect from 1st of June 1990, and was promoted as senior lecturer, effective from 1st October 1994, and professor, with effect from October 1st, 2006. She has supervised over 35 postgraduate dissertations and theses for MPH, PhD, and the fellowship program in community health, and has over 65 publications in international journals. Thank you. Within this university, Professor OmokhodioN has served in various capacities, including Subdean Postgraduate of the then Faculty of Clinical Sciences and Dentistry between 1992 and 1994, and 1996 to 2000. Acting Director, Ibaraka Program between 2000 and 2003. Acting Head, Department of Community Medicine between 2003 and 2006. And Head, Department of Preventive Medicine and Primary Care, 2010 to 2014. Outside this university, she has served as consultant with international agencies in community health, country coordinator for the Dreyfus Health Foundation program in Nigeria between 1995 and 2005, short-term consultant for the World Bank in 2003, visiting lecturer, Department of Public Health, University of Kuopio, Finland in 2005, visiting professor to the Occupational Medicine program at the Department of Medicine, University of Alberta, Edmonton in Canada, that was in 2009. Research advisor to Shell Petroleum Development Corporation, 2011, and academic coordinator, Doctors as Educators Program, 2011 to date. I thought you want to applaud all those. She is a member of the Global Health Network on Disease Control Priorities, University of Washington, and a member of several professional bodies, including Nigeria Medical Association, Society of Occupational and Environmental Health Physicians of Nigeria, Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria, Society of Occupational Medicine UK, Hearing International Nigeria. She is currently the editor-in-chief of the Occupational and Environmental Health Journal, an honorary consultant, community and occupational physician to University College Hospital, Ibadan. She has also served as external examiner to several Nigerian universities and the University of Sierra Leone. Professor OmokhodioN is the patron of the Christian Medical and Dental Association student session of this university, where she also serves as a Christian counselor. She is married to Professor Samuel OmokhodioN, a pediatric cardiologist, and the marriage is blessed with children. I now call on Professor OmokhodioN to deliver a lecture titled Danger, Men at Work, the Pitfalls, the Perils, and the Panacea.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, the Registrar, the Librarian, Provost College of Medicine, the Dean of Faculty of Clinical Sciences, Professor Malomo, Dean of Postgraduate School, Dean of other faculties and of students, Directors of institutes, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am grateful to God for the singular honor and distinct privilege to deliver this inaugural lecture on behalf of the Faculty of Clinical Sciences of our great university. I'm grateful to the university administration and the dean of my faculty for the opportunity to give an account of my sojourn in academia up till now. The Department of Community Medicine has gone through metamorphosis from the Department of PSM at the inception of the Faculty of Medicine in 1948 to the time when the department was split into three in 2000 and Department of Community Medicine came to be. The Department of Community Medicine was again renamed in 2011 when the Department of Health Policy and Management evolved, and we had to change our name to Preventive Medicine and Primary Care. And last year, 2015, our name was reverted to Community Medicine because this actually describes what we do in the field of medicine. We provide services within the community to achieve disease prevention in the populace and thereby reduce the healthcare burden in the hospitals. The first inaugural lecture from our Department of PSM was delivered by Professor O. Kale, and the second by Professor Adefunke Oyemade. These lectures were delivered prior to the split of the department in 2000. When we had a Department of Community Medicine, the first lecture from that department, from that new department, was given by Professor Azuzu. And this is the second inaugural lecture from that Department of Community Medicine. Community medicine has several subspecialty areas, including epidemiology, reproductive and family health, and rehabilitative medicine. My inaugural lecture today is the first ever in our university in the subspecialty of occupational medicine. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, permit me to go back 4 decades to describe my sojourn in the field of medicine. A little over 40 years ago, in 1974, a young girl sauntered into the precincts of this great university to be trained as a physician in the first and the best in the country. I must make special mention of my tutorial masters and my teachers that were in the medical school, who actually were my mentors in medicine, surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, and PSM. Professor Ade Tuibi, Professor Ayola, Professor Oluri, Mr. Itayemi, Professor Ladipo, and Professor Kale, who provided the strong academic stimulus during my training years that prompted my resolve to return to this great university to teach medical students. That I am here 40 years later, having fulfilled this resolve, is a testimony to the faithfulness of God. My sojourn in academia after graduation started at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where, after following recommendation by one of my mentors, I took the master's and then the PhD in occupational medicine, working at the frontiers of science in a relatively new discipline. After completion of my degrees in the UK, I resisted the lure to proceed to the US, and then I returned home in 1990 to take a job in the Department of PSM to make the much needed contribution to occupational medicine in Nigeria. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, permit me to quote from the scriptures that say, "It is of the Lord's mercies that we're not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness." I stand to testify of God's faithfulness through the years as I published in this university, and that I'm now able to present this lecture as a mark of my contribution to the field of medicine that I have come to love. Occupational medicine is a small specialty, small but very important. There are less than 100 of us in that specialty. The field of occupational medicine focuses on work and health. Bernardino Ramazzini, an Italian physician, acclaimed the father of occupational medicine. He was the first to emphasize the need to ask the question from patients, "What is your occupation?" And he said, the answer to this question may give the clue to the etiology of diseases. And this recommendation holds true even today. And we still teach medical students of the need to ask that question, "What is your occupation?" And that this question should not be taken lightly in the course of clinical history taking. Ramazzini warned about the dangers of occupational exposures to dust in the workplace and made recommendations for the protection of workers. This warning is still timely in present-day Nigeria, where occupational exposures in the developed world, decades where we have prevailing exposures in Nigeria that are like what obtained in the developed world decades ago. I have focused mainly on this specialty in my research and practice of medicine, and I have coined the title of the inaugural lecture to reflect this emphasis and bring to the attention of all my listeners the need to focus on work-related ill health with the caption, "Danger, Men at Work, the Pitfalls, the Perils, and the Panacea." The next slide shows an outline of my lecture. At least half of man's waking hours are spent at work. Exposures to the workplace therefore constitute significant input to the health of workers. If the work environment is healthy, workers are likely to be healthy. But if not, ill health and fatality can be associated with work. Occupational toxicology was therefore the natural beginning of my inquiry in occupational medicine. Toxicology is the study of the harmful effects of chemicals in biologic systems. Occupational toxicology focuses on the effects of chemicals in the workplace, and the focus of my research for my PhD was the toxicokinetics of lead in occupationally exposed workers and controls. I sought to determine if sweat levels of lead in workers in the tropics was a significant route of excretion. We know that lead is excreted through the urine, but my thesis was to look at the role of lead, of sweat, in excretion of lead, as that would be important in a tropical environment. So we know that lead has been studied quite a lot. There have been many studies that have outlined the routes of absorption, the effect on the target organs, and excretion mainly in sweat, but mainly in urine. But excretion in sweat had been reported, but the significance had not been shown. So I conducted studies on acclimatized workers in Nigeria, normal persons in Nigeria. So normal healthy subjects in Nigeria, normal healthy subjects in the UK, lead-exposed workers in Nigeria, lead-exposed workers in the UK, and I compared their sweat levels. I found that the sweat lead levels of non-occupationally exposed persons in the UK and in Nigeria were about the same. And then I found that for non-occupationally exposed persons, the sweat levels was about 10 to 50% of the blood levels. So what I demonstrated was that whether you were in Nigeria or you were in Britain, there was a significant loss of lead through the sweat in people who are carrying a heavy burden of lead in their bodies, i.e. occupationally exposed workers. And we tried to, and one of the good things about this study was that it all agreed with isotope studies. So I knew I was on the right track. And then we did this with other heavy metals, cadmium, nickel, manganese, and we found that these toxins, unlike electrolytes like sodium that tails off in sweat of acclimatized people because the body needs to conserve them, but the toxins are released freely in the sweat of workers who carry heavy burdens. So that was the conclusion of my study, that sweat losses of toxins was an additional route of excretion in occupational exposed workers in the tropics. On my return home, this prompted me to look at blood lead levels in the Nigerian population. So I collected some samples from patients in the outpatient department in the UCH. And my findings showed that lead levels ranged from 3 to 27.6 micrograms per deciliter. And I found that only 1.5% of people were out of the range even for the UK limits. And I also took tap water, and I found that our tap water was quite safe, less than 5 micrograms per liter, which was within the WHO level. But since then, several reports of blood lead levels in Nigeria have been published, and many of these have been done in subjects who are supposed to be control subjects who are non-occupationally exposed, and they have high blood levels. So it's very puzzling that there are people who are normal and not exposed, but they are sitting in the population, general environment, and they have high blood levels. And this gives a cause for concern because you wonder what's happening in the environment. And also, it raises the issue of the need to look at what is happening in the laboratories because we want to know whether we have internal and external quality assurance programs for lead. Many laboratories across the world participated in external quality assurance. And they do this to demonstrate their proficiency. So laboratories must be able to participate in something external to them to show that whatever samples come from their laboratory is actually correctly measured. So in the London School of Hygiene, I did this in my department. But I found when I come to Nigeria that many people were not doing external quality assurance. At the best, they had internal quality assurance. But this is something that every laboratory that is worth its salt should actually be involved in. So what is also striking is that I found that unlike various parts of the world where lead levels were dropping after they removed lead from petrol, in Nigeria, lead levels kept rising. So I had doubts about what was really happening and that we need to look at lead in our environment and we need to look at what is happening in the laboratories to be sure that we're actually reading the right signals. Lead exposure in children has more severe consequences than in adults. And why that is so, there's so many other reasons, but one of the reasons is that children absorb about 40 to 50% of the lead that they ingest. Children are always ingesting dirt, soil, and various particles, and a lot of hand-to-mouth activity during this age actually encourages them to ingest those toxins. And to think that they ingest about 40 to 50% compared to adults who ingest only 10 to 15%. So it's important to find out what is happening in the environment. And when we looked at what was happening, what I did was to carry out a study on primary school children in Ibadan and took blood samples again to the UK for analysis. I found that lead was in their blood to the range of 4 to 37 micrograms per deciliter. About 75% of these children had blood leads that were greater than 10 micrograms per deciliter, which is the cutoff point that was used in the US at that time. So it was quite a significant amount of our children that had blood lead levels that were greater. And this is comparable to, you can contrast it to 0.2% of school-age children in the US with this same cutoff point. So 75% of Nigerian children and 0.2 of people in the US were above that limit. And 0.8 of of children in the UK were above that limit. So other workers in the north of Nigeria, in the southeast, have actually done studies to confirm this, that there's a significant proportion of our children that have lead levels that are above the limit. So what it means is that our environment is not safe, it's unsafe for children. And we saw this play out when we had the Zamfara lead poisoning incident, which demonstrated the danger of childhood lead poisoning. What happened that people were mining for gold in Zamfara state, and while they were doing that, they contaminated the environment with water and soil. In the water and the soil, they contaminated it with lead, leading to the death of 400 children. And it is reported that this is the worst outbreak of lead poisoning in modern history. And it demonstrates the fact that uncontrolled work activities can be a source of danger to the workers, to their families, and to the communities where they live. We do not have to wait for another disaster to set up a public health structures to address the heavy metal pollution in our environment. I'll next go on to the informal sector. You know, I was talking of men at work. There's a lot of people who are working in the informal sector in Nigeria. 70 to 80% of the workers in Nigeria are in the informal sector, and a lot of them are in trading. But there's a significant proportion of people who are doing various trades like mechanics, printers, hairdressers, mill workers, barbers, tailors, and the like. Many of these people are men. This segment of the working population caught my attention for various reasons. They have unregulated work activities, low educational attainment, poverty, exposures to unprotected workers to potentially harmful diseases, harmful substances, and various work conditions that were adverse, and there was no occupational health services provided for them, all indicating the fact that they were caught in the vicious cycle of ignorance, poverty, and disease. Some of these workers are even lauded by the press for entrepreneurship, and people who are doing metalworks or making pots out of various scrap metals from motor cars, they are being lauded for entrepreneurship. And occupational health practitioners are concerned that no one is paying attention to the long-term consequences of the harmful exposures of metal fumes in this trade. So I have directed a lot of my research efforts towards people who are in this sector. And we find that many of these people, their work is taking place in roadsides, residential places, and they're producing harmful exposures to themselves and to others around them. Some are engaged even in manufacturing processes that can very well be in a factory. They're engaged in that in their residential premises, for instance, with soap making. And some of these have been developed as poverty alleviation. So my research has shown that a lot of these diseases that these people have can be mitigated. They have very simple problems that we can actually prevent. The next slide shows the hazards of workers in various trades, and that shows that the work environment that is divided into 5 components of physical, chemical, biological, mechanical, and psychosocial has as hazards that people who work in those workplaces are exposed to. And the next slide gives you examples of that. And you also find from other slides the various artisan trades that we have looked at. I have looked at mill workers, I have looked at people who are tailors, I've looked at people who are printing, I've looked at people who are hairdressers, I've looked at people who are grinding pepper, and welders. Quite a number of these people have distinct health problems that are associated with their trade. For the welder. You can see this welder, he's just doing his job without any protection. And he's exposed to welding fumes and to ultraviolet radiation, which can lead to eye irritation, photokeratitis, which is the inflammation of the cornea, and cataracts. And it can predispose them to infections. And there are other, I will now talk about, so these are other workers, hairdressers, tailors that we have looked at, and carpenters. All of them have their various health problems. Hairdressers are known to be exposed to hair chemicals, and occupational asthma is a problem with them. Tailors also have respiratory problems because of their exposure to dust from fibers. And carpenters, of course, are also exposed to wood dust. So these are problems that people face in this environment, in these workplaces, that nobody is actually looking at to see what we can do for them. So I would just like to address a few of the problems. Low back pain is a common problem that I found across the board in many of the trades. And it's a very prevalent problem in occupational settings, especially settings where people are in manual trades, having heavy physical exertion, bending, twisting, and adopting very poor postures. The occurrence of low back pain is associated with a lot of these postures, like the mechanics, and even in the community where people are sweeping the ground or where you have the road sweepers, you have those kind of postures is what is associated with low back pain. And we did studies on low back pain in rural and urban areas. My studies showed, because literature had said that low back pain was an industrialized problem and that it wasn't a problem of the developing world. But my studies showed that even in the rural area, we had a 12-month prevalence of 40% in Igbora for low back pain and 44% in Ibadan. We did the study in Idikon. And the next slide shows you the prevalence and indicates that the prevalence was actually higher, was very high among farmers and also high among artisans. So we knew that low back pain is a problem, is a common problem, and it's something that is preventable. Next, I'll look at noise-induced hearing loss. That's another important problem in our environment. Exposure to noise over time can result in hearing loss due to the damage to the hair cells in the inner ear. Noise-induced hearing loss, as it is called, results in the constant exposure to sound levels above 85 decibels over an 8-hour work day. And we find that it's workers who are involved in heavy machines, such as printing, textiles, agriculture. These are the people that are involved in this kind of work that produce excessive noise. There are several industries in Nigeria which people have worked on and demonstrated that there's a high incidence of noise-induced hearing loss. In textile industries, in steel rolling mills, there are several workers that have demonstrated noise-induced hearing loss. But we demonstrated this in the informal sector with the people who grind pepper and yam flour. I found that the noise that their machine emanates varies from about 88 to 90 decibels, which is higher than the 85 decibels over an 8-hour working period. The larger machines used for grinding elubo, they produce about 101 to 105 decibels. And we found that 1/4 of the study population had difficulty with hearing, not surprising. And audiometric testing showed that 33% of them had bilateral hearing loss compared to 18% among controls. Other workers in the informal sector, such as printers and people who are exposed to work in noise in their various workplaces, also will come down with noise-induced hearing loss. In formal industries, there's provision of hearing protection in form of earmuffs and earplugs. But in the informal sector, the workers are left to their own discretion. I'll now go on to accidents. The form of accidents and injuries were very common in the workplace among the artisan groups. And our recent study showed a very high incidence of accidents. And injuries were usually on the hands, and injuries were associated with people who worked longer than 8 hours a day. And several studies have shown that workers in the informal sector, while they have work clothes and they have overalls, they do not use protective equipment, such as masks, goggles, and gloves. Many of them are not even aware that it exists, and if they know, they cannot afford them. So they are at risk of all the exposures. I will now move over quickly to the children at work. While I was walking around in the community, I came across children in markets, on streets, workshops, and so on. The explosion of the child labor phenomenon started in the early 90s and was associated with the introduction of the Structural Adjustment Program. Child labor is defined as all forms of economic exploitation. Any work that is likely to be hazardous or interfere with the child's physical, mental, spiritual, or moral or social development. You would find that people will say child labor and child work. Child work should be distinguished from child labor. Child work is a concept that encourages children to socialize, to learn to be responsible adults. So it's different. So it's not to say that not every child should be at home and not working. But children can be working at home as part of socialization. But if work deprives child of development, like going to school, even at home, it is child labor. The UNICEF report, now we have in the Minimum Age Convention, 138, says that no children under the age of 14 should work. But UNICEF reports that in Nigeria, there are 15 million children under the age of 14. And they're doing all kinds of jobs: bus conductors, domestic servants, apprentices in various trades. Our studies in child labor were the first to look at health problems. Other studies had looked at the social aspects of child labor, but we looked at the health problems of children in the markets. And we found quite a number of simple health problems: musculoskeletal disorders. We had schistosomiasis that was diagnosed looking at their urine for schistosoma ova, wounds, anemia. We did quite a lot of investigations on these children, and we did their weight for height and weight for age and height for age. And we found that these children were very malnourished. 36% were underweight, 43% were stunted. And we found that most of these children, about half of them, were registered in schools, even though we did our studies during working hours. So we knew that there was a problem in the school system. So our next research inquiry was to compare the social demographic and the health problems of working and non-working children. Children in public schools who were attending school, and if you worked after school hours, we compared you with those who did not work after school hours. And we found that low parental education, type of residence, were what was associated with working. About one-third of the children who were working were underweight, 34% were stunted, compared to 20% of those who were not working who were underweight, and 26% of those who were not working who were stunted. So it was obvious that something was happening even within the same socioeconomic status, because we control for socioeconomic status. It was obvious that something was happening about those working children, which was making them more malnourished than their peers. And we put it together that they were expending a lot of energy in their walking around on the streets. So any energy expenditure that they had was actually dissipated. Any energy that they had from eating was dissipated while they were walking around. Next, we looked at parents, because we know that child labor actually originates from the home. Many of the children on the streets, 92% of their parents knew they were there. So child labor originates from the home. And we wanted to find out what kind of homes do these children come from. And we did a study in our environment, in Idiko again, and we found mostly that older parents, Muslim parents, polygamous parents, people who were unskilled and partly skilled, those were the people that were more likely to have children working. And we found that even the family size, the larger the family size, the more likely it was that the children in those homes were working. So these tell us the parental factors. Parents are actually involved. In fact, what we also found was that women were more in support of child labor than men. Child labor is still prevalent in Nigeria today. One of the pitfalls of this practice is that it interferes with the child's development. The perils are the dangers of street work, road traffic accidents, sexual abuse, and associated sexually transmitted infections, locally endemic diseases, etc. Our findings indicate that there's a need for a multifactorial approach to curb the phenomenon of child labor. Poverty alleviation, family planning, free education until JSS level, female education, targeted especially at mothers, are some of the components of the intervention that we proposed. The government needs to ensure that all children have access to compulsory education as a frontline response to child labor. Nigeria needs to commit to the international standard that she's signatory to, such that the ILO Convention 182, which prohibits the worst forms of child labor, which is by nature work which is carried out that is likely to harm the health, safety, or morals of children. Nigeria needs to commit to that. And in furtherance of this, legislation should be in place to prosecute and apply sanctions to employers who employ and exploit children. Next, I will move to women. Danger, women are also at work. Women have multiple roles: childbearing, child rearing, and homemaking. Working women, therefore, have additional responsibilities which they need to juggle together on a daily basis. A woman's role as a homemaker, wife, and mother is not negotiable. Thus, her engagement outside the home creates a phenomenon of a double day. At the end of her day in paid employment, a woman starts another day in the evening when she returns home to fulfill her domestic obligations. This increases the physical and psychological demands on women and the potential for work-life imbalance or work-life conflict. The focus on women at work is increasingly important as the proportion of women in the workforce is increasing all over the world. An additional trend is that with increasing educational attainment, more women are moving into traditionally male occupations which have high job demands. This has raised concerns about the effects of work and health. Occupational exposures may also affect accompanying children. You can see in that slide, there's a woman who's carrying bricks and she has a baby on her back. Another woman is on the farm. She has a baby on her back. So these children are inadvertently exposed to the occupational hazards in the work environment, plus the risk of having them around, like if that brick drops, for instance, that child will be adversely affected. So women have those kind of issues as they come into workplaces. But the one I would like to focus on is, which I have done some work on, is the effect of work on pregnancy outcome. The effect of work on pregnancy outcome has been looked at in many parts of the world, and many people have come up with different factors in the workplace, such as shift work, standing for prolonged hours, heavy physical work, and so on. But very little data was available from Africa. Our own research on work and pregnancy outcome, done together with my colleagues in University of Alberta and Professor Mrs. Onodeko and Dr. Roberts, was the first set of data on occupational exposures and pregnancy outcome in Nigeria. We looked at 1504 women in lying-in wards, and we took a history of occupational exposures and work activities from them. And then we looked at their data in the case notes to collect pregnancy outcome. And what we found was that we found that professionals and caterers were okay as far as low birth weight and preterm deliveries was concerned. They had the lowest rates. But healthcare workers had the highest rates of both. And also, tailors had a high rate of preterm births. With the tailors, we found that they actually registered the presence of vibration in the workplace through the pedals that they used, the manual pedals that they used in sewing machines. And there was a study from Quebec that had actually found the same thing, that had found that vibration, whole body vibration, actually leads to preterm birth. So we also suggested that preterm birth was very likely to be the reason why the tailors had this high risk for preterm deliveries. A study in the Philippines, there was very few studies on work in the home and pregnancy outcome. So I also looked at that because we work so hard in the home, we women, that if anything happens as a result of work in the workplace, if a woman works just about as hard, she can also have similar consequences. There was a study from the Philippines that associated household chores with low birth weight. And our study found that heavy physical work at home was also associated with low birth weight. We are currently looking at healthcare workers to see why they have those kind of adverse outcomes. We analyzed our data further and found that there were other factors that we were looking at, other outcomes, low APGAR score at 1 minute and 5 minutes. And we found that physical exertion at work and cooking with kerosene were associated with low APGAR scores in 1 minute. This finding suggests that in addition to known obstetric and maternal factors, the work and the home environment may make significant contributions to pregnancy outcome. There are also other reproductive problems that we've looked at in women. We looked at hairdressers. We had a large study. We had 1,700 hairdressers, and we looked at them for occupational hazards and sexual and reproductive health issues. We found that 72% of the single hairdressers were sexually active. A quarter of the sexually active ones had ever had abortions, and 2/3 were using contraceptives. 10% of them reported sexually transmitted infections. And this indicates that there was a need for a reproductive health intervention as well as occupational health intervention among this female occupational group. In summary, the health of women working at home or in paid employment deserves attention, as physical and mental health problems may take their toll while they continue to care for the family. The protection of the unborn child should also be a major concern in the health and safety of women at work. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I have described the pitfalls and perils of men, women, and children at work, the summary of which is that gainful employment, whether in the public, private, or informal sector, can be a danger to health. I've narrated my venture into the world of work, particularly as it affects the teeming masses of workers in this country. I was also mindful of while I was doing this, I was mindful of our citadel of learning. I have also done some work on the hazards of students in this university, and also hazards of workers in laboratories in Ibadan, including UCH. We know that the Ebola virus actually was a wake-up call for all of us for the need to protect healthcare workers. I have seen while walking around in the premises of our institution that there's lack of observance of safety regulations in our premises and even the business premises, and how this institution is ill-prepared for emergencies such as fire incidents. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I wish to submit that the panacea for the pitfalls and the perils in the workplace is primary prevention. Occupational health the goal of occupational health is the maintenance of the highest degree of physical, mental, social well-being of workers in all occupations. In the furtherance of this goal, I set myself the task to develop intervention programs for these various work groups I have looked into to help to break the vicious cycle of ignorance, poverty, and disease. Following several studies of this, I set up these intervention programs with the help of Dr. Mary Olwayemisi Balogun and other residents in our department. I want to acknowledge her for exceptional leadership and coordinating skills, which will have been very useful in our intervention programs. I also want to acknowledge our resident doctors who have gone out of their way to go into the communities, and some of these communities are really not very pleasant places to be, but we went into those communities to deliver these programs because they needed them. And we've developed various topics within our seminars to address occupational health, reproductive health, and general health problems, such that these problems can be tackled anywhere. We can present this anywhere to any group of those workers. So we have packaged this for various workers like carpenters, welders, and so on. To address the problem of women, I have put together a women's health research group, which is a multidisciplinary research group, and it focuses on women's health. Apart from, it does reproductive health and other areas of women's health from the time a woman is from the time a woman is born as a girl child until she becomes an elderly person. My recommendations, these are about outreach. My recommendations, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, my contribution to occupational medicine is only a drop of water in the big ocean of the needs. I wish to commend Professor Akinyinka, Provost College of Medicine. He was the first person who took a step in the direction of requesting that our institution should have a health and safety policy. This occurred after several staff had injuries while working through the construction sites in the college. And this document was drafted by 4 of us, Professor Amanu Boadu, Professor Dr. Fred Oshiname, and Dr. Oladapo Kari. And it has gone through our academic board and has been approved at the academic board as a health policy for the college. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I want to commend this document to the university that we need a health and safety policy. Part of the policy emphasizes the need to address issues of excessive hours of work, the need to make annual leave compulsory, the need to have fire safety measures, and the need to have checkups for staff over 50 years. We have expertise in this university to run this. We need health and safety people to come and help us address this. My other recommendation is about our central laboratory, Mr. Vice Chancellor. That laboratory needs to be developed, and we need to institute external quality assurance so that any results that comes out of Ibadan would be counted as authentic. The government of Nigeria needs to focus on the health of its working population. This is an investment in the economy of the nation. The health and safety of the teeming masses of workers in the informal sector is a major concern. These workers suffer from preventable conditions. And from my own experience, they are organized in unions, they have regular meeting places, and they have designated locations where you can find them. So we can provide services to them through the primary healthcare system. Because after all, the goals of the primary healthcare system is to take healthcare services to places where people live and work. It is my considered opinion, Mr. Vice Chancellor, that Nigeria needs a federal agency dedicated to serve the health and safety needs of the workers across this country. This agency will be multidisciplinary, and it will cut across a lot of all the disciplines in occupational health, safety, hygiene, and toxicology. Thank you. This agency also should address collating of data for monitoring the heavy metal pollution in our environment. And it should also look at high-risk groups of persons, such as pregnant women and children. There is a need. We have a national policy on occupational health and safety, and this policy should address the needs of women and should also address the needs of children, and especially the unborn child, and should also address the issue of child labor. To all workers in this audience, I have used this lecture to draw your attention to the dangers in workplaces and the responsibility that we as workers have to avoid pitfalls and perils in our occupations, and to take steps to ensure that our workplaces are healthy and safe. It is not enough for workers' unions to fight for wage increase and improved work conditions. Safety must be high on the agenda of unions, and they should be the advocates for protecting the health and safety of their members. I'm rounding up now and just going to say thank you very much for everyone that has come to listen to this lecture. I hope I have managed to convince you about the importance of our discipline, occupational medicine. I would like to thank people that have helped me along the path of my career. First and foremost, I'd like to thank God, who has kept me all these years. For in him we live and move and have our being. I'd like to acknowledge my parents, Chief Jibe Akinyede, Mrs. Agnes Akinyede. Both of them have passed on. My mother passed on last December. My father said to me that my academic achievements, the sky was my limit. and my mother prayed and worked hard to help me to realize that. I want to acknowledge my cousin, Dr. Dele Akilo, sitting right here, and I also want to acknowledge Professor Akin Ojo, member of my family, formerly Department of Physics. And I want to acknowledge my sister, Bisi Enwere, and all my siblings, Dr. Tayo Akinyede, Senator Shola Akinyede, Mrs. Bola Adewale, Mrs. Fumi Adeyemi, Mr. Ismond Akinyede, Ms. Yinka Akinyede, Mr. Oluseyi Akinyede, and Dr. Olatunde Akinyede for all their support and encouragement over the years. I wish to acknowledge my in-laws, the Omokhodion family, especially my sisters-in-law and my brother-in-law. And I wish to acknowledge the Oyekunle family, Elder and Mrs. Oyekunle. I'd like to acknowledge my church family, Christ Chapel, University College Hospital, Ibadan, for their love and support to my husband and I over the years. I wish in particular to acknowledge Assistant Pastors Doku, Ehimien, Okedare, Ndikom, Alo, Balepo, for sharing the workload of pastoring with my husband and bringing much needed relief. I also wish to acknowledge all ministers of God here present. Any minister of God, you are acknowledged, and I want to thank you for coming. Reverend Oyo, Pastor and Pastor Mrs. Olubi Johnson, Reverend Awe, thank you very much for coming. Reverend S.M. Lee, if you are here, thank you for coming. May God's grace continue to be upon your ministry. I want to acknowledge the Chief Medical Director, UCH, Professor Semitokwe Alunge. He took the first step towards ensuring the health and safety of staff in UCH by establishing a health and safety committee in the hospital. I'll also like to acknowledge all my teachers in preventive and social medicine. Professor A.O. Lucas, Professor A.B.O. Yediron, Professor Dunton, Professor O. Kale, I think I saw him come in, Professor Adefunke Oyemade, Professor Modupe Onodeko, Dr. Aderunke Olumide. In particular, I want to thank Professor Yediron, who admitted me into the department on my return from the UK. And I must acknowledge Professor Modupe Onodeko, Dr. Aderunke Olumide, and Dr. Professor Yejide, who played significant roles in helping me settle down in the department. I would like to acknowledge other senior colleagues who were instrumental in my academic career. In particular, I want to thank Professor A.O. FOLASHADE, also former Vice Chancellor. He was the provost in the College of Medicine when I applied for the job. And he said to me very clearly, don't go and look for a job anywhere else. The college needs you here. I can say that by the grace of God, I have not disappointed him. I wish to acknowledge the academic staff of my Department of Community Medicine, Professor Azuzu, Dr. Waje, Dr. Adebiyi, Dr. Olaolorun, Dr. Shekoni, they're all sitting down here, Dr. Balogun, Dr. Uchendu, Dr. Kuola, Dr. Adebayo, Dr. Cadmus, and family physicians, Dr. Ladipo, Bimakinde, and Ilori. I want to acknowledge the committee in the department that has put this program together, led ably by Dr. Adebayo. And I want to actually commend and thank them, Dr. Adebayo, Mr. Odum, Dr. Kokola, Dr. Cadmus, and the resident doctors. I want to thank you all very much for all that you have done to put this program together. I'm grateful also to the resident doctors who have passed through the unit over the years. Many of them have contributed ideas as to how we can do things better for the artisans. I want to thank also the non-teaching staff, Mr. Tony Odum, Mrs. Aluku, Mr. Badru, Ms. Olani Pekun, Mrs. Adeniji Ago, and Mrs. Okunla, Mr. Idowu, Ms. Inegbeniki, Ms. Oyeniyi, Mrs. Oyeniyi, Ms. Kendi, and Mr. Abiono for their assistance at various times in the department. I particularly want to acknowledge Mr. Odum for his assistance with so many things. Administrative is just such a helpful person. I want to thank you, Mr. Odum. I also want to commend our public health nurses. Our nurses do such a great job. They do a lot of sacrificial work in the communities. I want to commend them. Ably led by Mrs. Tejumola. In particular, I want to acknowledge our occupational health nurses. We have occupational health nurses in our department. We have an occupational health school in UCH, and some of the nurses are products of that program. And so they work with us alongside the residents in the communities doing our occupational health outreaches. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues in the Faculty of Clinical Science, all of you who have taken time to come for this program. I particularly want to acknowledge our new provost, Professor Olopade. I want to acknowledge him for finding time to come for this while he's celebrating his victory at the elections. I want to acknowledge all my colleagues in the Faculty of Public Health, the Dean of Faculty of Public Health, the new Dean, and all the members of the Faculty of Public Health that we've worked together over the years. I'd like to acknowledge my research collaborators at the University of Alberta, Canada, Professor Nicola Cherry. I wrote to them, I said I needed something to present an inaugural lecture. And they said, inaugural for what? You were a professor how many years ago? What are you inaugural? So I had to explain that there's a long queue. There's a long queue in the University of Ibadan for inaugural lectures. And that if you are patient enough and you stay on the queue, one day it becomes your turn. So I want to acknowledge them, Professor Nicola Cherry, Professor Jerry Beach, and Igor Boston. And then my colleagues at the University of Kuopio, they helped us with the mechanics and the hairdresser studies. Dr. Noe Barengo, Mira Clementi. I want to also acknowledge Professor Ladiko and Mrs. Delano of Association for Reproductive and Family Health. They have worked with us over the years on reproductive health programs for the artisans. I wish to acknowledge all my colleagues in the Women's Health Research Group, Dr. Joko Adeleye, Elizabeth Oloruntoba, Tolu Bella, Tunde Adedokun, Mary YMC Balogun, Yetunde John Akinola, Femi Pokuola, Ayodele Adebayo, Eniola Cadmus, Abimbola Obimakinde, Temitope Ilori, and Doyin Bello. In particular, I want to thank Professor Oye Ojengbede for accepting to be the advisory member of this our new research group. I would like to acknowledge my professional colleagues in the Society of Occupational Health Physicians of Nigeria, Society of Occupational and Environmental Physicians of Nigeria. I want to thank them for their support over the years. Over the years, they have helped me, and they have helped to get some funding. Even sometimes they give me materials. You know, when I need research materials, they'll give me free syringes and figs and whatever we needed. And sometimes they help to get funds for our research. I want to acknowledge them. In particular, I want to acknowledge Dr. Kole Owo, formerly retired from ExxonMobil. Dr. Kole Owo, for his support and encouragement in my academic pursuits. I want to also acknowledge my colleagues from the Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria, especially those who have come from outside Ibadan. Professor Eoke Alausa, I want to acknowledge you, sir. Thank you for coming. I have come a long way from my days in Queen's College, Yaba, but I cannot forget the legacy of excellence on which we are raised. Before I go to my days in Queen's College, I want to acknowledge everybody. I want to thank all of my colleagues for coming. If I have missed you out in any way, please pardon me. I had a constraint putting all this together. So thank you very much, everyone. And I want to thank my teachers in Queen's College. I can see some Queen's College girls here. I cannot forget the legacy of excellence on which we were raised, a legacy of good grooming and etiquette with mastery of English language. I'm grateful for all my teachers in Queen's College, Yaba. They are the ones that gave us a boost and said, we are the best, you can do it. And I came to Ibadan and I say to people in Ibadan, you are the best, you can do it. I thank the various agencies, Welcome Nigeria Fund, Dreyfus Health Foundation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs Finland, Gates Institute for Population and Reproductive Health through the College of Medicine, and ExxonMobil Nigeria, who's funding us for our women's health program. I thank them all for the funding that they have provided over the years. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, as I round up, permit me to specially acknowledge this man sitting right down here. My husband of 36 years, Professor Samuel Ilere OmokhodioN, a distinguished pediatric cardiologist, a reverend gentleman, the senior pastor of Christ Chapel, UCH Ibadan. A servant of God indeed, in whom there is no guile. I always tell my close friends, Prof. OmokhodioN, my husband, he's a good man. Thank you. I want to acknowledge my children, Osahan, Ofre, and Osage. Ofre is sitting right here with her husband. They have been the olive plants, as you've seen. Her husband, Dr. Femi Oyekunle, is a resident in psychiatry. They have been our olive plants round about our table. I thank God for their achievements, which make me feel that I'm not just a career woman, but a mother and a role model for them. Finally, I say Ebenezer. Hitherto has the Lord helped me. I am eternally grateful to God, the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God. To him alone be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your attention.